Hey guys, it's Mr. Hussey here. Just gonna do Tuesday's math lesson with you. Hopefully be a little shorter here in terms of the time of the video. So let's go ahead and get started. There's last week, a few days ago, we learned how to do slope. Okay, so slope is the rise over the run. So for instance, the slope of a line like this, you run one and you rise one, right? So your rise over your run will be 1 over 1 for a slope of 1. Okay? In a situation like this one, I know right off the bat that's a negative slope because if you're walking this way, it goes downhill. Okay? So our rise over our run, you find a spot, you run once. Okay? So our run will be 1, but our rise would be, if I run over 1, it'd be a drop of 1, 2, 3, 4 before you hit that line again. So the rise would be -4. So it's -4 over 1, which is -4. Okay, so that's one way to find the slope, is the rise over the run. Now today we're going to learn a different formula, which also finds a slope. All right, and Mrs. O'Brien will be using this a lot in her class next year. So another formula is M is what we use to say slope. So M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So it's another way to find the slope. Okay, so go ahead and write that down. So what they want you to be able to do is take 2 points like this, so the directions say to find the slope of the line between each pair of points. Okay? So I'm going to assume that maybe you don't have this sheet of paper. So the things you would need to write down is your slope formula. You're going to title this slope formula. Okay. And then we'll write down number 1 and we'll do these problems here. So number 1 says -13.8 and 312. I'm just getting this from here. So -13.8 and 312. I'm going to take my information from this sheet and put it on a separate sheet of paper. Okay, now what they want you to do, basically your directions for this whole thing, is to find the slope. Okay, now we could go ahead and plot those points, draw a graph and plot those points, but it'd be very hard to draw the graph if you didn't have graph paper. And then we could do our rise over a run. Or you can look at it like this. These two, this is important, so listen to this part carefully. These 2 points are always x, y. And these are always listed as your x is listed first and then your y. All right? So let's call this like your first set of points. So we'll call this like x1, y1. And let's call this our second set of points. So we'll call this x2, y2. All right. And then let's go ahead and plug that into our formula. So we'll write down our formula m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is one of those formulas that you're going to remember for high school. You're going to remember it for college. You're going to put this formula to memory, basically, because you're going to use it so many times from here on out. So we're going to take y2, which in this case is our 12, because we have x2, y2, so that's going to be 12, minus y1, which is going to be 8, over x2, which is going to be 3, minus x1, which is going to be a -13. Okay, so on the top we have 12 minus 8, which is 4. On the bottom we have 3, that would become a plus 13, which is 16. So our slope, if you divide by 4 there, if we reduce it to 4/16, our slope is a slope of 1/4. Okay. That's a slope of 1/4, and it's as easy as that. All right, now if I went a little too fast or just was confusing, let's look at number 2. So number 2 says 19 negative 12 and 5 and 16. All right. So once again, we always have to remember that it's always listed as XY. Okay, so you always have your X first and your Y. Let's call this set here X1, Y1. And let's call this set here X2, Y2. Now, if you're curious, I think you could try this out if you just want to try something. But if you call this one X2, Y2, and that one X1, Y1, so you call this the first set and that the second set, I believe it still works. So you can check that out and see if it works. Maybe I'll do one of those later. But I just like to call the first ones the ones, and then the second ones the twos. But these have to be XY, has to be XY. Okay. So we'll take our formula. Sometimes when I'm rushing, I make my Y's look like X's, so it's better to be careful there. Okay, so we'll take our formula. Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1 is the slope. And our Y2 is 16. So we got 16 minus our Y1 is negative 12. And then our X2 is 5. And our X1 is 19. Okay. So on the top, negative 16 plus 12, that's going to give us 28. On the bottom, 5 minus 19, that's going to be in the negatives, right? Negative 14. And then that's going to be 2-to-1 ratio, right? So it's going to be 2, but in this case, since there's one negative, it's going to be a slope of negative 2. So our answer for that one's going to be negative 2. Okay, why don't you guys try 3, 5, 7, and 9? So why don't you guys try the odds here? 3, 5, 7, and 9. So you can pause it there for a minute and just write those down on your separate paper. All right. And then why don't you guys go ahead and give that a shot, pause it, see what you get, and then we're going to go ahead and check some answers. All right, and if you did those correctly, you should get negative 6/5, 5, negative 1/3, and 5/4. And you may need to pause that and just kind of see where you messed up, if you messed up. If you want to try some extra ones, here's the answers on this side. Okay. So let's go ahead to the back. Okay, now there are a couple special cases. Okay, so let's look at some special cases. So I'm going to go ahead and label here on my notes. You guys will have a few more examples here. So I'll block off that area for you. And then I want to show some special cases here. So let's look at special case number 11. So I'm just copying this down from the back of our worksheet here. Negative 5, negative 4, and 1, negative 4. Okay, so I'm going to go through this a little quickly. X1, Y1, X2, Y2. So in this case, it's going to be negative 4 minus negative 4 over 1 minus negative 5. Okay, so negative 4 minus negative 4 becomes negative 4 plus 4, which is 0. And on the bottom, it's going to be 1 plus 5, which is 6. So when you have nothing out of 6, like you've made no shots out of 6, you're at like 0% shooting, right? So that's going to be a slope of 0. That's called a special case. That's a slope of 0. So 0 out of 6. Okay. Now, there's another special case, which here, number 12. Okay, which I'm going to copy down here. So you probably already know what this is going to be based on our lesson a few days ago when we had the horizontal line and the vertical line. Some of you guys may remember that. So this is going to be x1, y1, and x2, y2. So in this case, there's going to be -2 minus 3 on the top. And then on the bottom, x2 is going to be 7 minus x1, which is 7. So in a situation like this, where you'll get like -5 on the top and nothing on the bottom, when the 0 is on the bottom, it's called undefined. Okay, it's not, your answer is not a slope of 0. Your answer is an undefined slope. And in real life, what that looks like is it's an up and down line, a vertical line. In real life, this one is a horizontal line. Okay, so horizontal lines give you a slope of 0. And I like to think of it as like this is more common, like you get nothing out of 6, no shots made out of, say you're shooting 3-pointers, right? You don't make any out of 6. Like sometimes that happens. But in this situation, it's kind of different. It's rare. It's not rare, but it just can't really happen in basketball. Like you can't take 0 shots and make -5, and that's why they call it undefined. Okay. All right. Now the lesson's going to continue here, so I'm going to flip over my paper. We're going to skip the more practice unless you want to. If you want to do the more practice, it's really not a bad idea. Let me see if I have. So here's some answers to more practice. I'm sorry, if you want to look at them, you can pause the video and take a look at those. Okay. But let's go ahead and see what we would do if we were given a table. Okay. So it's basically just the same thing. We're not doing anything different here. So let's look at 17. So I'm gonna flip over my sheet of notes, and I'd encourage you guys to do the same thing. Okay, and they want you to find the slope. So your directions for all these are to find the slope. Okay, and in this case, you have a whole bunch of different options. Okay, so if these were all plotted on a graph, you'd have what? -6, 11. You have -2, 1. You have 2, -9. And you'd have 4, -14. So you're going to have some kind of line that looks something like this. Okay, and it should be a straight line, not curved. It's just I rough estimated it real quick. So I know that if I'm walking this way, like this way, right? If I'm a little person and I'm walking in this direction, when I hit that hill, I'm going downhill. So I know this is going to be a negative slope. All right. So we're going to take our formula. And I'm going to take any two of these sets of points I want. Like I'm just going to work off the first two, this one and this one. I'm going to call this x1 and y1. I'm going to call this x2 and y2. All right. So when I plug these in, y2 is going to be 1 minus 11. And x2 is going to be -2 minus a -6. Okay, so on the top, we're going to get -10. On the bottom, this will turn into a negative 2 plus 6, right? So that's going to be 4. And then when we reduce that, it'd be negative 5 over 2. And that's the way. You don't have to put like negative 2.5, because usually with slope, they keep it like this. They keep it as an improper fraction, okay? So that would be your answer, negative 5/2, or negative 5/2. And that makes sense because if you look at the way I just kind of plotted these 1, 2, 3, 4. I plotted these 4 points real quick. You can see that that's going to be a negative slope. So I'm glad that we got a negative answer there. That's showing me we did that correctly. All right. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's look at number 19. All right. Why don't you guys go ahead and give 19 a shot? Okay. So pause the video, give it a shot. All right. So when you're back with me here, I'm going to pick these two again. We'll call it, actually, you know what? No, I'm going to pick this one and this one. Okay. And let's see if I come up with the same. Hopefully you pick these two and we'll see if we come up with the same thing. So this is x1, y1, x2, y2. So as long as you make sure it's always an xy, xy, and you keep them on the same level, you should be okay with whatever you pick. So we'll say the slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. In this case, the way I picked it, it's going to be 6 minus 6. Same with you. If you pick this one, you would have still had 6 minus 6. And then mine's going to be 8 minus a negative 1. Okay. So down here, I'll get 9. On the top, I'll get 0. And that's going to be a slope of 0. All right, let's try one more. Why don't you guys try 21? It looks like on the ones that line up like this, it looks like that's going to be either undefined or 0. Because you see how this one was 0. That one's probably going to be undefined. Okay, well, let's try 21. If you also want to try 20 and 22, might not be a bad idea. But you'll have some homework questions on these two. So let's try 21. All right, go ahead. Pause the video. Give it a shot. This is our last one before our homework. All right, so you guys can see I just copied down this chart on my blank paper here. Okay, so we're going to take our formula to find the slope. Remember, that's what we're doing here. We're finding the slope. This time, just to show you guys what I mean by, I'm going to choose this one is my x1, y1. And then I'm going to choose this one is my x2, y2. And let's see if I got the same thing. Maybe you guys picked some different ones, but you did xy, xy. Let's see if we get the same thing. Okay, so y2 is going to be 13. You would have a different number if you chose like this, and that's okay. You keep your number. So it'd be 13 minus, in my case, it's going to be 6. And then x2 would be 6 minus, and in this case, it'd be 3. So I'm getting 7 over 3 as my slope. Okay, now if you chose this one, you would have had like -1 minus -8. So that would have been, you would have got a 7 on the top, and then over here you would have 0 minus a -3, which still would have given you 3. So we would have got the same thing. All right. Okay. So your homework for today is go ahead and take this sheet here, and you can skip the last two on the top. So I'm not going to have you skip a lot, but you can skip the last. So here's your homework, right? You can skip the last two on the top, and you can skip the last two on the bottom. All right, so we're doing this sheet 1 through 7, and then 10 through 13. Okay, thanks guys. Have a nice day.